Welcome back to the Talking Hedge. I'm Josh Kincaid, Capital Markets Analyst and host of your Cannabis Business Podcast. Today, we're going to talk about distressed cannabis assets, as well as the Securities and Exchange Commission's warning about an uptick in fraud in the cannabis industry. To do that is Katrina Glogowski. She's an angel investor and attorney. Katrina, thanks for being back on the podcast.
Morning, Josh.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. So looking at, looking at the SEC warning, they kind of summarize this by saying with more institutional investors targeting the cannabis space, business operators need to be ready for more robust due diligence and focus on the details of their capital raise, from complying with the law to investor transparency.
Josh, we've been talking about this basically the entire history of this podcast. Number one, to do your due diligence. Number two, to be a real business, not a letter of intent, not CBD infused leggings. You need to be a real business if you are going to start taking third-party funds. And the SEC's warning is not a surprise. This is not news to anyone who's been in this industry for any amount of time.
Yeah, it shouldn't take the SEC to essentially remind you that you should have a CFO or some kind of, finance expert, as well as compliance. So investor transparency and legal, that's all going to come from the legal department and compliance and finance. And it's crazy that so many companies out there that we've seen don't have that. Somebody like Ease that can burn through $166 million is crazy to me, and then still not be successful at delivering.
Some of the stuff we have seen borders on criminal. You get a big chunk of funding. The next day you're driving around in a Bentley. No, that's not your money. It is the company's money. Also, and we saw this especially early in the industry, throwing ridiculously lavish parties. And we all like social events, but I guarantee you, corporate America is not spending $100,000 every Friday to promote their brand with a huge party. I would give cannabis entrepreneurs, any entrepreneur, caution about how you spend the money you get, because it is not your money, it's the company's money. And once you start getting shareholders, you are accountable to those shareholders for how you spent the money.
Yeah, you definitely have a fiduciary duty to those shareholders. We can see from MedMen buying, mansions, some of the most expensive real estate in Beverly Hills. I think maybe they saw one too many episodes of Silicon Valley comedy show, where these startup companies do stupid stuff. In their case in point, I mean, they're a whole podcast in and of themselves. But looking at some opportunities for distressed assets, we used to call these vulture funds when people would kind of hover over struggling firms and then offer credit card like 40% return in fees and whatnot. But distressed assets have become its own kind of segment, if you will. So you have real estate investment trusts, you have distressed assets. There's basically blank check companies, and they're targeting their own segments. You might have a distressed asset in property, plant, and equipment, or maybe it's only real estate. Either way, there's a need for it.
Absolutely, and this is not unique to cannabis.
No.
This line of business, buying, selling, acquiring, merging with distressed assets, has been around forever.
Right. And I think we're going to see some consolidation in the market. And so with that, we saw from March of 2019, that market capitalization for the 33 biggest cannabis stocks was down 45% by the end of the year. So falling from 54 billion to 30 billion, and projected revenues dropped 17% as well. So with that, this is kind of creating this opportunity where an investor may come into an existing market rather than look at Massachusetts or Florida or an emerging market. They might look at pennies on the dollar, distressed assets, along with SOPs. So with the experience, with the existing license and everything else, that might be an easier play. And you're only paying 30 cents on the dollar, maybe, by comparison to a new market.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're seeing some of these mega cannabis companies starting to realize that they've overstretched and need to control. Canopy being a perfect example, divesting themselves of some of their offshore holdings because they grew too big too fast and the revenue just wasn't there.
Yeah, they didn't see the sales either. I mean, this report kind of highlights that by saying that cannabis sales were going up during the kind of pre-COVID as people were hoarding it. So then sales settled down. States began reporting a decrease from this time last year. And maybe that's just a difference in discretionary spending, or maybe because they're essential businesses, they're not rushing out and hoarding. Maybe they already hoarded and they have plenty. Either way, it looks like some of those sales are peaking and then dipping as well.
Right.
So asking the question, is this an opportunity? So in the last year, 13 special purpose acquisition companies have listed on exchanges with an eye towards cheap cannabis assets. So that, or, also known as distressed cannabis assets, can offer a lower barrier to entry in what still may believe to be a bull market. Either way, I mean, you're getting it for cheap. If you're going to get into the marketplace, now is the time to kind of circle around and look for some opportunities.
If I was going to have a significant investment in the cannabis space, I would start at what can I acquire? Why reinvent the wheel? Somebody out there is struggling. Somebody out there is more than willing to sell you their business to get out for pennies on the dollar. So why would you build a new $10 million spend, another $2-3 million on equipment just to throw away? No, just acquire.
So you were a license holder for a producer processor in Washington State. You've seen a lot, from Oregon to California. We go to Oregon all the time, Alaska, Colorado. We've been around. And so when you see Illinois and Massachusetts and then New York struggling to even, get voted on, what's the advantage? Would you, as an investor, look at distressed assets in an existing marketplace, or would you look for that initial transition from medical or in a new onboarding marketplace like in New York or Florida or even Massachusetts?
Again, I'm looking at, let's say, a state that legalizes. I would be looking to import an existing successful brand product line into that state. For example, Fat Panda is very popular in Washington. The product is proven, the packaging is, the individuals that create the product are compliant. They are proven to be compliant. So now if I'm in Alabama and I want to start making candy, okay, I can come up with my own recipes, my own emulsification system, my own processes and procedures, my own packaging, or I can say, Fat Panda, welcome to Alabama. What would you do? It's basic business sense. At this point in the industry, whatever you're coming up with is not new. No one is going to come with a new can. We've seen it all. Do you want a sour candy? Do you want a sweet candy? Do you want a chocolate? Somebody's done it already. And that is really growth is going to be. It's not going to be Katrina's cannabis candy. It's going to be the established brands moving into new markets.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's going to be the franchise model, royalty, since you can't legally have a franchise federally. But we did a podcast previously about SOPs. If you haven't seen that podcast, check that out. So transitioning from that into taking advantage of the opportunities, can anyone get involved? Can anyone buy or invest in distressed asset for cannabis companies?
Yes and no. It depends upon state. For example, in Washington, if you are going to touch THC, you have to be a resident. In California, you can own 9% of a cannabis company that touches THC without being a resident. So make sure you understand the laws and regulations of your state, or in the alternative, don't actually be involved in something that touches THC. For example, license the recipe, equipment, or ancillary. So in that sense of the term, anyone can buy distressed assets. You just have to have the cash.
Well, we're based in Seattle. It's pretty tech heavy. Is there any websites or any spot people can go and find something like that? I know in the real world or outside of cannabis, there's opportunities for that. Will those sites just kind of gobble up this new cannabis opportunity, or will brand new sites emerge?
Easy there, Josh. You're setting me up. So what we have, and I'm going to be honest about this. I own a distressed cannabis company, forwardspark.com, and so you most certainly can. We do equipment sales there, but I'm not the only one. We also have, believe it or not, Craigslist. You can find cannabis processing equipment on Craigslist. You can also find people trying to sell their licenses, their 502 licenses on Craigslist. And there's a whole business of brokers out there that are buying and selling cannabis licenses, as well as equipment and real estate and everything else. Again, buyer beware, know who you're working with, and know what you're getting. Now, if you're going to buy a future roll, a joint rolling machine, it's pretty obvious. Does it work? Plug it in. Okay, great. If you're buying a cannabis license from a broker, is the license clean? Are there any points against that license? Make sure you know what you're buying, and make sure you can qualify to transfer that license in whatever state you're in. You can't just say, Josh, I'm going to buy your license, here's $100,000, and walk away. You have to go through the entire regulatory process to obtain that license. And then lastly, if you're going to be dealing with a broker or consultant or any other type of individual purporting to represent somebody selling one of these assets, first and foremost, make sure they have the authority to do so. So where's their contract with the individual who's actually selling it, and do they have the rights to sell it? And then look at the actual terms of the deal. So how does that broker get paid? And is that payment to the broker legal? If you're going to sell a 502 license in the state of Washington, it is the financial interest rules, the true party and interest rules are very strict. And if you're selling a license and you're going to take a commission out of that sale as a broker, is that legal? You're going to need to actually do your due diligence. But there are many resources out there for an investor that wants to be involved in distressed assets. Just definitely, if you're going to pick something up for 30 cents on the dollar, which is the hope in a distressed asset purchase, why?
Yeah, probably because of the return. I would think there's different tiers, with license holders being the riskiest and the most complicated. But I would hope that on the other end, you'd have fast turnaround with just equipment and even property. Finding a place can be difficult because of all of the restrictions, at least with manufacturing and production.
Right.
But something similar to like a restaurant equipment reseller is what I would think that this would be, along with like a Craigslist, eBay situation. But yeah, right now is probably a good time to start accumulating all of that. There's a lot of different people doing it, but to be niche in the cannabis space is an opportunity.
Yeah, it is, because you need to know what you're talking about. If you're going to buy a future roll joint rolling machine, you better know what a future roll joint rolling machine is.
Yeah, because if you don't, then you're going to buy it and be like, why did I buy this thing? It sucks.
You're going to have a garage full of trimmers that no one will ever buy.
Yeah, that reminds me. I need to do a new video for that. After we went to MJ BizCon in December, saw some new machines, and with this whole COVID thing, there hasn't been a lot of interest, but I did get an email today. Somebody was looking for a machine, so look for that video to drop. All right, any last words? Where can they find your website for distressed assets?
ForwardSpark.com, spelled just the same way you say it, ForwardSpark.com. And just my overall caution, use simple common sense. If you're going to go buy a used car, drive it, kick the tires, make sure you understand. If you're going to buy a distressed cannabis business, take a look at the business. Why did it fail? Why is it struggling? Are they compliant? Do they have liabilities? We talk about this time and time again, Josh. Do your due diligence and know what you're paying for. And lastly, bring cash, because money talks. Money talks. These complicated deals of, hey, we'll go ahead and share the stock over a period of time, and the original owner can stay on board, and all of these complexities just tend to cause problems. If you want to take over Katrina's Cannabis Candies, show me the money and I'm walking away. And that's the way it should be.
Make sure you have some SOPs. And if you don't, or don't know what we're talking about, there's a video. We just did it. So check it out. With that, we're going to roll this one up. I'm Josh Kincaid. I want to thank my guest, Katrina Glogowski. She's an angel investor and attorney in Seattle. Thanks for being back with us.
Thanks, Josh.
I'm Josh Kincaid. This is the Talking Hedge. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, or don't. And I'm out.